part 1 we saw that if we could observe the mind of another person as we can their body, then we would assume they have a mind so that we could more accurately predict their behavior, in particular the behavior of their mind. But since it is logically impossible for us to observe the mind of another person, we don't assume that another person has a mind in order to improve the accuracy of predicting their behavior. Rather, we assume that another person has a mind in order to simplify our model for predicting their behavior. Thus, the reason that you assume that I have a mind is not so that you can more accurately predict my behavior, but so that you can simplify your model of humans by assuming that all humans are like yourself in having a mind. In order to clarify what this entails, I wish to present an illustration. Suppose that I'm playing cards with two people and that one opponent believes that I have a mind while the other doesn't. What matters to both people is their ability to predict my behavior, and this ability is independent of their belief as to whether or not I have a mind. You may reply that if I have a mind, then my thoughts will determine my behavior, so it does matter whether or not an opponent assumes that I have a mind. But from the point of view of my opponents, it doesn't matter. Here's why. Suppose that I have a choice of two options, B and D. Suppose that I have a choice of two thoughts, A and C. And suppose that if I think A, I'll do B, whereas if I think C, I'll do D. Note that since reality is indeterministic as covered in an earlier video, strictly speaking A can't imply B, but for this example we're assuming that it can for simplicity. Now since my opponents can't observe my thoughts, all that matters is my propensity to do B or D, not whether or not I think A or C. Hence the opponent who assumes that I have a mind will estimate the probability of my thinking A versus C, which implies the probability of my doing B versus D. While the opponent who assumes that I don't have a mind will dispense with A versus C and will simply estimate the probability of my doing B versus D. We can see that the opponent who assumes that I have a mind has no advantage over the opponent who assumes that I don't have a mind. What counts is their ability to predict my behavior, and this is independent of whether or not they assume that I have a mind. I've contrived a simple example to illustrate the idea of interest, but this simple example generalizes to thoughts of arbitrary complexity because the person who assumes that I don't have a mind can create exactly the same predictive model as the person who assumes that I do have a mind. For what the one will refer to as thoughts in my mind, the other will refer to merely as conceptual constructs in the model. This is possible since it is logically impossible for either person to observe my thoughts. In the end, all that matters is which opponent best predicts my behavior, and assuming that I have a mind confers no advantage in this endeavor. Lest this seem contrived, atheists may speak of Mother Nature, and they may refer to evolution as if it is an intelligent process. Thus, even though atheists don't believe that reality has a mind, they may informally speak as if reality does have a mind. This is an informal example of the idea of conceptual constructs that parallel the idea of thoughts. Returning to theism versus atheism, under theism reality has a mind, while under atheism reality doesn't have a mind. Practically speaking, it doesn't matter whether or not reality has a mind. Practically speaking, what matters is our ability to predict the behavior of reality. Intuitively, this is why both theism and atheism are rational. To review, we have seen that the issue of theism versus atheism reduces to the issue of whether or not reality has a mind. And this is a technical point that has no practical implications, since it is logically impossible for us to observe the mind of reality, even if reality has a mind. Practically speaking, what matters is our ability to predict the behavior of reality. Still, the question remains for us to answer: does reality have a mind? As we have seen, you assume that I have a mind not in order to increase the accuracy of your model for predicting my behavior, but in order to increase the simplicity of your model by making me and all other people the same as you. If you assume that all other people have minds as you do, your model is simpler than if you assume that only you have a mind. So does reality have a mind? We will conclude that reality has a mind if assuming so simplifies our model. As I show in my book, this is a highly technical problem that I don't answer because it depends on developing a system of formal logic to represent the problem and to solve it, and I lack the expertise to complete such a task. I conjecture that the result will be in the affirmative, namely, that the assumption that reality has a mind will simplify the model. However, In everyday life, the idea of the existence of God is one that people interpret in the most personal terms, and no one is going to come to such a position based on a technical proof in formal logic. Furthermore, in real life, the simplistic criterion is used to distinguish two models on the basis of a substantial difference in the complexity of the models, such as the geocentric model versus the heliocentric model of the universe. The difference in complexity of these two models was dramatically obvious by the late 1600s, not requiring a technical solution in formal logic. This is how the simplistic criterion is used in real life. Since the question of the existence of God reduces to a technical solution in formal logic, the difference in complexity of the two respective models is so small that it will be indecisive in establishing which model is preferable. This is the technical reason that both theism and atheism are rational. If both theism and atheism are rational, why do theists believe that theism is so important? Why do theists fight atheism as if atheism were a horribly pernicious idea? I conclude that theists fight atheism because they are taught by their religious leaders that ethical principles would be arbitrary under atheism and that there would be no afterlife under atheism. However, in earlier videos we saw that ethical principles do not come from divine revelation, but from reason applied to experience. We've also seen that the idea of dichotomous afterlife in Western religion is irrational and hence false. As a result, the existence of God is irrelevant to ethical values, and the existence of God is irrelevant to afterlife as it is conceived in Western religion. In my book, I also show that we don't need God for afterlife, as I mentioned in the video on whether religious claims matter. In this light, we can see that the fear that theists have of atheism is unjustified. Just as much evil has been done in the name of religion, even in the name of Jesus Christ, so much evil has been done in the name of atheist ideology such as Marxism. But the respective evil is not the result of bare theism or of bare atheism, but is due to additional ideas that were added to the bare theism and bare atheism respectively. In conclusion, both theism and atheism are rational, and bare theism versus bare atheism has nothing to do with cultural values or ethical values or afterlife. Finally, since theism is rational, it is rational to believe that reality has a mind and to pursue a sense of intimacy with reality as you would with another person. This is a hallmark of monotheism. It is rational and it is deeply meaningful to most people, myself included.